So here are the list of ingredients for a basic sponge cake that I'm going to make for the baked Alaska. I have some baking powder, salt, sugar. The sugar I've reduced for a normal sponge cake because you're gonna have some meringue, which is very sweet, and you're also going to have ice cream, which is gonna be super sweet. So I've reduced the sugar in the cake, and that's a good thing about baking your own cake. You have control over the sweetness and the other ingredients that you are going to put in there. I've also have full fat milk and some vanilla and 2 eggs. For the flour, I'm using all-purpose flour. Most recipes call for pastry flour or cake flour when you're baking a sponge cake, but I have neither of those, so I'm substituting the regular cake flour by minusing 2 tablespoons of cake flour per cup and adding 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to make it the equivalent of pastry or cake flour. So keep that in mind if you don't have pastry flour or cake flour and you just have all-purpose flour, so you can do that adjustment before you bake. The flour needs to be sifted. Here I have my baking powder and some salt. The flour is sifted together with the salt and baking powder. You can sift it twice or thrice if you prefer. So here I have a baking sheet, which is like a cookie sheet. It's been prepared by spraying the bottom layer underneath there and laying parchment paper on top and compressing the parchment paper to stick properly so that the cake is like a rectangular shape and it doesn't have rounded edges. So it's also been sprayed on the top as well. And for a sponge cake, I normally just add a light dusting of flour so that it doesn't stick and the parchment paper peels off nicely when it's cooled. It's a very delicate cake, so you want to be careful and make sure that the tray is well prepared. Vanilla. So for the flour, add it a little at a time and until it's blended. So this is the batter that's been done and completed. Now I'm going to beat the egg whites and fold it in. cookies with a nice foamy batter that's almost has a steady stream like this, see? So you know it's the right consistency and there's no lumps. So we'll try and put this in the 350 degrees oven, middle rack, until it's done or a toothpick comes out clear. So I'm gonna set it in a greased tray that's prepared. And then we'll even it off. That's to just shake out some air bubbles, and now we're gonna put it in the oven. This is ready at 15 minutes. So you can see there's a few air bubbles, but that's okay. You can see the skewer comes out clean, and there's a hole that's there, so it's fully baked. So I'm going to let this cool in the tray and lift it up on the parchment paper edges when I need to remove it. So that's why it's nice to have a little bit of a overhang of the parchment paper on the sides, so you can lift it out of the tray without it breaking, because this is a long rectangular piece of cake and the cake is not very thick. It's a very thin layer, almost like made for a jelly roll. And if I need to make a jelly roll from scratch, I would bake it just like this. So you can see the cake layer is very thin on the side. So you can see that. It's not very thick. So it's a good width to roll and fill. So here's the wood, and you can see it's lifting off nicely because from the parchment paper, because it was well greased and prepared for this cake. And this is the way the cake looks after it's cut. So it's nice and soft, and it's a good cake to mold baked Alaska. I will put the recipe down below, so if you want to try it out when you do like a jelly roll or baked Alaska, this is a good cake recipe to try.